Greetings, my name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition, we're joined by Mr. Kenneth Morris, Jr. Welcome to the Cultural Caravan.
Thank you.
You know, first off, we want to let the audience know that Ken has a very unique lineage. You happen to be the great-great-great-grandson of the great Frederick Douglass.
That's right.
As well as the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. How did that happen?
Well, it happened on my mom's side of the family. My grandfather was Frederick Douglass III, and he was Frederick Douglass's great-grandson. My grandmother, Nettie Hancock Washington, was Booker T. Washington's granddaughter. The two of them met in 1941 at Tuskegee, then called Tuskegee Normal School, but now Tuskegee University, and of course that's the school that Booker T. Washington founded in 1881. My grandparents were walking across campus and they literally bumped into each other, didn't know that the other descended from an historic family. They fell in love at first sight and they wound up getting married 3 months later. And then when my mom, Nettie Washington Douglass, was born, she was the first person to unite the bloodlines of these historic families. She was an only child, so I have the honor and privilege and blessing to be the first male to unite the bloodlines.
Now, as we think about your work, first of all, what inspired you based on this lineage? First of all, let's talk about your background.
Well, my background is, I come from the business world. I had my own advertising and marketing company which catered primarily to the travel industry, and a little bit later in this program you're going to meet our founder and executive vice president, Robert Benz, who is a good friend of mine. Robert and I have known each other for 20 years. Robert handed me about 7 years ago a National Geographic magazine, and the cover story was 21st Century Slaves. I looked at that headline and I reacted the way I think most people do the first time that they hear about the existence of human trafficking and modern-day slavery, and that is, slavery didn't end with the work of Frederick Douglass and the abolitionists and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, but it still exists in every civilized and uncivilized country around the world, including right here in the United States. And when I started to research this issue from that magazine, I have two daughters who at the time were 12 and 9 years old. And when I found that there were girls that were my daughter's ages and even younger that were forced to be sex slaves in the brothels of Southeast Asia, and they were forced to service 35, 40 men a day, and that slavery exists in this country, and that the average age that a young girl here in the United States is forced into prostitution is 13 years old. Once I had that information, I could not look my girls in the eyes and just walk away from this without doing anything. So that was my introduction to this, and of course I have this platform that my ancestors have built through struggle and through sacrifice, and I knew that I could leverage the historical significance of my ancestry to stand up to do something about this issue.
Now, the name of the foundation, the Frederick Douglass Family Foundation. Just first of all, tell us about your mission in terms of what, in line with what the goal is in terms of ending human trafficking, and how that mission extends itself, particularly to the lineage of your two ancestors.
Well, our mission is really twofold, and the first part is the obvious part, and that is to carry on and perpetuate the legacies of these two great American heroes. But the second part is really continuing Frederick Douglass's work for freedom, and that is to raise awareness about this issue, really so that we can educate the public that this exists. And in our minds, the way we go about educating the public is where education should start, and that's with young people. So the Frederick Douglass Family Foundation is a service learning organization. We go into schools, secondary schools, middle schools, and high schools all around the country. We focus on underserved areas or economically challenged areas where young girls are most vulnerable to becoming victims of sex trafficking. We can go in and we can talk to young boys at an age when they're forming their identities and their character and who they're going to become about demand and their attitudes towards women and choices they make as adult males themselves if they make the wrong choices, how it can feed into the demand side of sex trafficking. And then we talk about the history of slavery in this country. We talk about Frederick Douglass, the abolitionists, how they went about abolishing slavery. We talk about the communication tools that Frederick Douglass and the other abolitionists used to communicate the inhumanity of slavery. Well, of course, Frederick Douglass published the North Star newspaper, which was the leading abolitionist voice. He wrote books, he gave speeches, they passed out leaflets and pamphlets. So that's the learning part of our projects, our programs. And then we transition into this modern day human rights issue, and that is slavery still exists. And we need modern day abolitionists to do exactly what Frederick Douglass did, and that's to communicate the inhumanity of today's slavery to their communities. And students today have the greatest communication tool known to man in the palm of their hands, and that's the internet, and the way that they're communicating with each other on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Through the stroke of a key, a young person can reach more people than probably Frederick Douglass could have reached his whole career as a publisher and a journalist. So once they have the learning part, the history of slavery, and we talk about this modern day human rights issue, then the students go to work on projects in their communities, and they're all around raising awareness about this issue. Frederick Douglass said it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And we just believe that we can really impact this issue by working with young people so that we can help, number one, prevent them from becoming victims. We educate them, we inspire them, we uplift them, and then because they're working on this issue, this global issue that's greater than they are, they're being empowered. And my other favorite quote is a Booker T. Washington quote, and he said, if you want to lift up yourself, lift up someone else. Mm-hmm. And our young people, mostly minority children, are being uplifted through these projects and this information that we're teaching them.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Now, just for those who may not be familiar with, and everybody, of course, I'm assuming is, but just share with our audience the contributions your other ancestor, the great Booker T. Washington, has made, and how those, you've been able to use those legacies collaboratively.
Well, of course, both Washington and Douglass were born slaves. Booker T. Washington was freed when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and he was 9 years old. So he had an opportunity to go to school. Now, of course, he wanted to go to school so badly that he worked in the salt and coal mines of West Virginia, and he would work long days just to save enough money to go into school or to enter school. And he would enter Hampton Institute when he was just 16 years old. Now, of course, we don't have a lot of time to tell the whole story, but just to give you the overview, he would graduate from Hampton, and he would start Tuskegee Normal School in 1881, as I mentioned, when he was just 25 years old. Now, he founded Tuskegee because if you think about it, when the last of the slaves were freed in 1865, there were 4 million slaves that, for the most part, didn't know how to read, didn't know how to write. They had been separated from their families. They didn't have property, they didn't have an education, so he really had to start with the basics, and in some cases that was teaching them hygiene and how to brush their teeth and tie their shoes. But the important part of his work is that he began to teach them something that they knew how to do. A tool, a trade, so that they could have a stake in the nation's growing economy. So I think his greatest importance was he was the person that really bridged the gap between the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil Rights Movement.
Now, I know that there has been a lot of talk about the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and there are going to be some very special programs which your foundation will be talking about when we bring on Robert. So I just wanted to, for a moment, just step back and think about what has been growing up, particularly with this legacy, and going back to your like that. How was it growing up, knowing that you were standing on the shoulders of these two giants?
Well, I've always known about this incredible lineage, and I've never celebrated it because the few times that I told people about this when I was younger, nobody ever believed me, and I never thought that it was a point worth arguing. And there was always a lot of pressure that was put on the males in the family to be the next Frederick Douglass, to be the next Booker T. Washington. I told you about my grandfather, Frederick Douglass III, who was a brilliant man. He was a surgeon, and the reason that he was down in Tuskegee that day when my grandparents met was because he had been commissioned down there by the Veterans Administration during World War II. He always walked around with this weight of expectation on his shoulders. He lived in the shadow of one of this country's greatest heroes, and he was the namesake of Frederick Douglass. I told you about the love story and how my grandparents met after 3 months, but there's also a tragic side to this, and that is when my grandmother was 3 months pregnant with my mom, the weight of expectation became too much for my grandfather to endure, and he took his own life. So my mom was born without a father, and she was raised without a father, and when I came along and I had this dual lineage, my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents really went in the opposite direction, and they weren't going to force this on me. So I really grew up, as I like to say, decisively disengaged from this lineage, and it wasn't until Robert handed me that National Geographic that Providence finally called, and I started to realize that I could use this lineage and this platform, and that really God had been preparing me for this moment in my life. And I think because I did find this mission on my own, it's much more meaningful than it would be had it been forced on me.
We're now joined by Robert Bentz, who is the co-founder and executive VP of the Frederick Douglass Family Foundation. Welcome to Cultural Caravan, Robert.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, and you know, we were just talking to Ken a moment ago, and he was telling us about the goals and the mission of the foundation. Tell us about the vision.
Well, you know, we focus on education. We believe that education and awareness is a big piece of reducing the incidence of human trafficking in the United States and around the world. And we saw it as a big need when we came into this, is awareness of what the problem is. And we thought the best place to start would be with young people and educating them, starting with middle schools and high schools. And in order to do this right, we really believe that this has to eventually become a national human trafficking education program, and we're really getting started right here in New York City.
Tell us about your program that you're bringing to New York City.
We're working with Mayor Bloomberg's office, and he is a great supporter of anti-trafficking initiatives, and they contacted us. They liked what we were doing in schools, and we plan to start a human trafficking education program in New York City public schools beginning in 2013, and beginning with at-risk schools and at-risk students first. I mean, this is it's a prevention program. Prevention is a big word, but we really do believe that it's a violence reduction program. We're reducing violence against girls and women in the long run, and we're teaching boys how to understand what some of their future decisions on this subject, what the consequences may be, and we're trying to teach them how to become better men.
Wow, very important. Now, you offer a curriculum to schools for those out there who might be considering approaching you about. Tell us about the curriculum that you're offering to other municipalities.
Well, we've always crafted curricula for specifically for an area, and we'll be doing the same with New York City public schools. And what that includes is we always use the same formula. It's helping young people understand the issue of contemporary slavery through the perspective of history. And so we call our curriculum History, Human Rights, and the Power of One. It comes in the format of service learning, and so we start off by teaching them an analogy of history, of how perhaps, for instance, the abolitionists, and Ken talked about it earlier, how the abolitionists used communication tools in the 19th century to bring awareness to the inhumanity of institutionalized slavery in the United States. We will then go and talk about contemporary slavery and a specific aspect of that, and then we'll ask young people to take what they've learned and take it on the road, take it onto their computer, and go out in the community and tell their friends, tell their peers, tell their family, tell business owners to get involved in efforts to help us understand what this really is. Wow.
Very important and very timely program. I know in addition, you have another special program that's 100 Days to Freedom. Please tell us about that program.
This is based on the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, and 100 days refers to the period between September 22nd, 1862, when Abraham Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, and 100 days later when he signed it on January 1st, 1863. And this was really one of the most dynamic periods in American history. These 100 days when people were wondering, is he really going to go through with this? Did he really just issue that Emancipation Proclamation? And is he serious? And that was the thought from both the white population and the black population, thinking, are we really finally going to be free, or is it another ruse? And of course he did sign that proclamation on January 1st, 1863, but what our program is about is we created a curriculum for schools, and this is for schools all over the country, and we've had about 150 different schools and school districts download the curriculum and are using it now. And what we're asking kids to do is to take a look at what slavery used to be, try to understand what freedom meant to those people and what it means to you now, and then we teach them about the issue of human trafficking, and then we've asked them to participate in a project, a service project that's attached to this. And we got 8 schools, we got 9 schools to help us to draft a new proclamation of freedom. And what this is it talks about human trafficking and all the different forms of human trafficking around the world, and it asks the United States Department of Education to help facilitate a national human trafficking education program. And now what the kids are doing is we turn that into a change.org online petition. And so the kids are promoting the link to that petition so that in the best of all worlds, we will go to Washington, D.C. on January 1st to celebrate Emancipation Day with thousands of signatures, with our new proclamation of freedom, and Barack Obama will say, come into my office, and he'll sign it just like Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation 150 years ago in that office.
Wow. Well, this is a tremendous effort, and I know that you've been getting a lot of good responses from those districts that you have reached out to. And I've also talked to Ken. I said I can also see this international. I don't know if you're planning to go global at some point.
You know, in fact, we are, and we sort of have dipped our toe into an international pool a little bit, and it makes great sense for us because the outline of this project can be overlaid into any country and any educational system anywhere in the world, and we envision it using the Frederick Douglass is the hero, and Booker T. Washington are the heroes, and our abolitionists are the heroes of our programs, but we envision heroes from those countries becoming a part of their programs and using the same formula that we use successfully here.
Well, I mean, I feel that the work you're doing is very powerful and will touch many lives. And certainly for those out there who may be interested in getting involved in the Frederick Douglass Family Foundation's efforts, please tell us, Ken, how they can do that.
Well, the best way to contact us is through our website, and that's fdff.org, which is the acronym for Frederick Douglass Family Foundation. And from there, we would love for people to be able to join our mailing list. That's the best way to keep up with all of our activities, and then to be able to communicate with us if they need something or interested in the curriculum. But you can download the curriculum on our website. It's available to anybody that wants it. It's free, but our website is the best place to reach us.
And can you say that website again?
It is fdff.org.
Okay. And we encourage our audience to reach out and to find out about the great work that both of you are doing in the spirit of the great Frederick Douglass, as well as the great Booker T. Washington. I want to thank you on behalf of Cultural Caravan for joining us and really sharing this mighty work that both of you are doing in terms of contributing in the spirit of both men to human rights and human dignity. Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you.